Plato's Atlantis has always been classified as a mythical city because it emerged out of his mere imagination. Another reason is that we don't find mention of Atlantis anywhere other than his works Timaeus and Critias. But discoveries like all the Tepes in Turkey, Göbekli and Karahan definitely raises a question on the understanding of history as we know. But why are we talking about it? People have been on Earth for a really long time, like 300,000 years. But for the 99.5% of our time, we have not made any big scientific discoveries. But it has only been in last 5,000 to 1,500 years that we have started to get good at science, which is really a tiny part of our entire existence. Now, when we talk about ancient cities, which were way too advanced and existed for older than 5,000 years ago, which is 3000 BC, they are often labeled as mythical. But why? Because we don't have enough archaeological evidence to prove it. And we like proof. But here is the interesting part. Some stories talk about these advanced ancient cities that were high-tech but got wiped by natural calamities like floods, earthquakes, or sometimes a meteor or a comet impact. But if metals like iron, bronze, and copper are considered new discoveries, then how did these ancient cities even exist? It's like trying to fit puzzle pieces, which really don't fit the timeline as we know. Plato has talked about a lot of myths and legends, and I've labeled them as well. But Atlantis. Why only Plato talks about Atlantis? And why we don't find a reference of Atlantis anywhere else? And how did he come to know about this? So Plato's great-grandfather in 600 BC, Solon, went to Egypt, where he had a debate with one of the priests of Egypt, where the priest actually explained Solon that how the Greek civilization is not as old as they think, and it goes back to at least 9,000 years from that time, which gives us a date of 9600 BCE. That's where they talk about Atlantis, which lies beyond the Pillar of Hercules, an island nation who is so strong and who is so powerful that it went ahead and conquered more than 80% of Europe. So what exactly the priest explains, Atlantis city was found by Poseidon, and they considered themselves as descendant of gods. Atlantis had a great architecture, a great military, and he also explains that how mountains, fertile lands, and plains, everything were present on a single island that gave them an edge compared to the rest of the world. They also talk about the agriculture which was present in Atlantis and how they flourished because they didn't have to worry about food. And when he talks about Atlantis, he tells him that the Atlantis existed a long before the flood that they believe which swallowed the world. And the priest also explains that how the people of Atlantis were really advanced and knew about the astronomy. But if Atlantis was so strong, how exactly was it destroyed? So the priest tells Solon that there was a fight with the neighboring kingdoms. You can consider Atlantis as a colonial British or a Spanish government, which went around the world and captured the other kingdoms. That's how Atlantis' greatness was known in Egypt and rest of the world. So as the people of Atlantis kept on colonizing the neighboring kingdoms, the god cursed them that their city would be destroyed, and Atlantis sank in the ocean in one day. This story does seem something out of fiction, right? One person or one kingdom going around the world, conquering everyone, and suddenly they disappear because of curse of God. But what is more astounding, that 9600 BCE, which is talked about in their dialogue, is around the year when we talk about a comet colliding with Earth, which is known as the Younger Dryas. And that impact actually happened somewhere around the Arctic Ocean, towards the north of Americas, north of Canada. And when it happened, there was a rapid increase in the sea levels, which could have resulted in sinking of Atlantis. Before we proceed further, let's talk about the advancement that the priest talked about of Atlantis. When we talk about advancement today, we think of machinery, scientific development like computer, or maybe an airplane, and that's how we imagine Atlantis. But that is not really the fact that priest was talking about. The advancement at that time meant how advanced was their military, the use of weapons. It could be they were using bow and arrows, but how their bow and arrows were more advanced than rest of the people or rest of the world, and how their swords were better than rest of the world, and how their military was organized compared to rest of the world. And the most important part is an advanced society. A sophisticated society at that time meant they had a hierarchical structure. They had king, then they had ministers, then they had clergy, they had workers. So they had a well-designed society. They had a well-designed irrigation system. Whenever you search for photographs of Atlantis, what we have drawn or what we have illustrated based on Plato's explanation, we see a main castle in the center, and then we see rings around those castles. So Atlantis was a city which was an island nation and made in parts. A lot of islands were collected together. It had mountains, it had plains. So Atlantis was a well-designed, well-used when it comes to irrigation, and well-structured city. That's what advancement meant. So that's why the advancement of Atlantis explained by Priest is not a city out of science fiction. It is just they were better than rest of the kingdoms at that time. Now, let's try and pinpoint the location of Atlantis first. So according to Plato, the Atlantis existed between the Pillar of Hercules. So Pillar of Hercules is between two mountains, which lie in the Atlantic Ocean and known as Strait of Gibraltar. And before the 1970s, that's where a lot of research was also done to find out that if there is an underlying city in the Strait of Gibraltar. Later on that, but in 1978, there was a book published by the name of Atlantis, Fact or Fiction, which actually changed the entire narrative of Atlantis, because the writer dismissed existence of any city under the Strait of Gibraltar and started talking about other possible locations of Atlantis around the world, because there were a lot of other sunken cities in ancient texts or in ancient legends, like the kingdom of Lemuria, which is known as Kumarikandam, a Tamil civilization. Then we have Dwarka, then we have Zealandia, and now we also have found another sunken city which is on the coast of Pumpuhar, which is in India, Tamil Nadu, which dates back to around 15,000 years. So there have been a lot of legends and so-called myths around the world of sunken cities. So that's what the writer used to discredit the location of Atlantis. And that's where everything changed. And the focus shifted from the Strait of Gibraltar to rest of the world, which actually made Atlantis look like another myth that doesn't even exist. But now, let's talk about the research that has been done, because there are a lot of explorers and a lot of researchers who have studied the Strait of Gibraltar and why it is a possible location. This area is very much prone to earthquakes and seismic activity because there are three tectonic plates that collide at the zone. One is the Eurasian, African, and Iberian. How exactly would these tectonic plates impact? So as we know, the earthquake happens because of seismic activity between two tectonic plates. Either it moves on the top, or it moves away, or they collide. That's how the earthquake happens. Similarly, in Strait of Gibraltar, as there are three tectonic plates, all the three tectonic plates keep on moving with each other, which causes a lot of disruption inside the ocean, which is the weakest point on Earth of the entire ocean. So in Strait of Gibraltar, there is not only the horizontal movement of plates, but there is also vertical movement of plates. So for example, if a city existed at this point on the tectonic plate and they actually go vertical, then this point would sink further in the ocean. And similar thing happens in Strait of Gibraltar again and again. We can see a similar vertical movement of two tectonic plates when we talk about the formation of the Himalayan mountains, where apart from Australia collided with the Eurasian plate, and the collision was so impactful that we have now mountains which are called the Himalayas. And these plates are still pushing against each other, which is increasing the height of Himalayas every year. So this is a phenomenon which is not only seen in Strait of Gibraltar, but around rest of the world as well. And due to this seismic activity, there is a plateau which is inside the Strait of Gibraltar, which is known as the Azores Plateau. And why Azores Plateau is important? Because all the scientific research which has been done on the Azores Plateau supports that there was a time when this plateau was above the sea level. So the rocks and formation found on the Azores Plateau suggest that they were in fact of a continental origin, and that it was once part of a landmass. And what's more interesting, the rocks that were found on the plateau have a high quantity of granitic detritus and high magnesium calcite. So scientific studies have found that granitic detritus, that is granite particles which are formed on the landmass and later sank in the ocean, and high magnesium calcite. So the presence of high magnesium calcite in the Strait of Gibraltar indicates that the rock formation in the region were formed above the water at some point in the past. Expeditions and studies which were conducted during the mid-20th century, such as the Swedish deep sea exploration by Hans Petersen in 1948, found evidence of deep water beach sand on the ocean floor near the Strait of Gibraltar. When any of the ocean or any of the sea comes in contact with a landmass, they deposit a lot of sediments and also erodes the soil which is there on that landmass, which causes a formation of a beach. But this should not exist inside the ocean. So if a beach exists inside the ocean, that means that once that landmass was above the sea level. Limestones are something which are formed on the Earth's surface. So limestones which are discovered inside the Strait of Gibraltar also raises a lot of questions. And this research is something that I've linked in the description, and you can go through the book yourself and look at what exactly they are talking about. Another possible location could be the Eye of Sahara. In 1965, during the Gemini 4 mission, two astronomers of America took a spacewalk for the first time. And they clicked more than hundreds of photographs of Earth from the space. And that's when they discovered a unique structure in the heart of Sahara, which is called the Eye of Sahara. Now, what's fascinating about the structure? That it has concentric circles, similar to what has been explained for the city of Atlantis by Plato. A lot of people consider this to be location of lost city of Atlantis. So when you look at the photograph and you look closely, you can see on each and every concentric ring, there is a white color patch, which is now known to be the settlements of salt. So if this place has salt deposit, then this place should have been underwater. But the interesting part is, when we look at the history of Sahara, and if we talk about the time period older than 5000 BC, Sahara was not a desert. It was a lush green forest and was covered with a lot of lakes and rivers, which dried later. And the possible reason, the younger dryas. So when we connect the dots, it looks like that this could be a possible location. But what exactly challenges this place as a contender is the explanation of Plato. So Plato says, you have to go through Pillar of Hercules. Then you come on an island, followed by an island kingdom. So he specifically mentions island kingdom. If Eye of Sahara was a possible location of Atlantis, then it should have been an island, but it's not an island. It's part of the African landmass. Another interesting thing, the plateau of Azores also has a similar design when we look at that. And according to Plato, there was an exit towards the south of the island, which is there in Eye of Sahara and is there on the Azores Plateau as well. So these are the two contenders which are speculated to be the possible location of Atlantis. But whatever the truth might be, we are still looking for it. And the sad part is that people are not researching enough when it comes to Atlantis. Now, let's see that why exactly Atlantis is only mentioned in Plato's work. So Atlantis is actually a Greek name that Plato gave that place. It could have any other name, and there is a possibility that other civilizations had a different name for this place. That's why Atlantis is only found in Plato's work. And it's not only Atlantis. As we previously talked about, there were other sunken cities as well, out of which few have been already found. For example, Zealandia, an entire continent which was around New Zealand, has been recently discovered, and now we know that there was an entire continent which supported habitation and a possibility that people were also living on that continent. Similarly, when we come to India, we have discovered Dwarka, which was previously considered a mythical city, just like Atlantis. But now we have remains of Dwarka in the Arabian Sea. So it's not that we haven't found some cities which were previously considered as mythical. So Atlantis is also on the same page compared to rest of the cities. It is a sunken city for which people are searching. And if not today, maybe in future it could be found. And that is the reason why this topic was so interesting for me, so that I wanted to bring out all the facts which are available, so that you can decide that if it is still a mythical city or there is a possibility we have a missing timeline from our history. So just to understand that if Atlantis was mentioned in some other civilization, because the information initially came from the Egyptian civilization to Solon. Because as soon as we hit 200 likes, we are going to make another video where we will try and find out if Atlantis was mentioned in Egyptian scriptures. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we would keep on bringing content on ancient mysteries. This is Harry signing off. Stay curious, my friends.